I don't know how much you all know about A2Zero. I do have a quick presentation on just kind of the background and what it entails, if that would be useful for this group. Maybe some of you already know a lot about A2Zero.
I think some of us do, but if you have a short presentation that you would like, I will make you a co-host. You can share it and go ahead.
Okay, yeah, it would only take about 10 minutes. It gives you a good background of what A2Zero is and what we're working towards. And then we can talk a little bit more about how we can be involved. And I think that will set the stage for us really well. So let me see if I can figure out how to do this. We use Teams a lot, so I'm not as used to.
So you should be able at the bottom to click on share screen. And then it should prompt you to select which screen you want to share with, like an application.
From a PowerPoint.
Here.
Forgive me. I think there. Can you all see this?
No. You after you select.
No.
Yeah. Now we can see it.
Bingo.
Okay. Cool. Thanks a lot again for giving me the opportunity to share with you a little bit more. So we'll start with the history of sustainability in Ann Arbor. There's a lot on this screen and it's small. The primary intent behind this is just to demonstrate that there's been a lot of work prior to what we've done in the Office of Sustainability, dating back 30 years. So this is the culmination of a long time effort that has finally turned into A2Zero. So as some of you may or may not know, it was last November when City Council unanimously adopted a climate emergency declaration, and they set a goal of being carbon neutral as an entire community by the year 2030. However, that was just a goal. So in that same resolution, they directed staff to create the plan for how to achieve this goal. And we were charged with presenting that plan to them just this March, so just a few months after. And what it means in practice is that as an entire community, we will need to find a way to reduce roughly 2.1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by the end of 2030. And so to get a sense for what that means, this slide shows what 2.1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide is approximately equivalent to. So it would be equivalent to taking 450,000 passenger vehicles off the road for a year. For some context, all of Washtenaw County is like 367,000, I believe. So again, a lot of information here. It's 2.3 billion pounds of coal burned. You can kind of just look through here. It's big. It's big. The point is that there's a lot of work to be done. And so as we think about reducing our emissions and how we're going to align with the community values such as equity, sustainability, and transformation, was to place these values explicitly into the planning process. And the bullets under each of these boxes highlight the characteristics that we brought into our planning process to ensure that we were staying true to those values. And then of course, we needed a vision to guide our work. So for us, that vision was together creating and implementing a just transition to community-wide carbon neutrality by the end of the year 2030. By the way, if anybody has questions, please just jump on in. So the process for developing the plan was pretty extensive. It involved a lot of engagement with the public. I know that some of you were involved with that. And what that process looked at was what peer cities are doing around the country and what lessons they've learned from this. Why reinvent the wheel if other people are already also working towards this goal? We hosted technical advisory committees to gather expertise about what was technically needed to achieve this goal. And those advisory committees were comprised of local individuals, experts in their fields. And we also hosted dozens of public engagement events, lots of outreach activities. And we did that to gather feedback and insights into what was socially feasible. And we did, I think it was 82 events within the time frame between November and the time that this plan went before council in March. So it was a lot of work. We are also working with partner organizations, just like you, to bring underrepresented voices into the discussion and to build collaborations that could help implement the final plan. There's no way that we can do it all by ourselves. We're going to need to partner with as many people as possible. So then we're now leveraging staff expertise and a review of peer-reviewed and popular press. You know, we're reading a lot of articles and trying to really develop this with the best science that we can. 82, there it is. Working days. We did all those public events. And we've got a long list of partner organizations. So here's the plan. Of course, you can't read that. It is available on at A2Zero.org, or the Office of Sustainability now has a new city website, which is A2Gov.org. That's the city website /sustainability. And so everything is found there. I can put that in the chat for you as well, where you can actually download the whole plan. You can see everything this contained, including this very small print here. So the A2Zero carbon neutrality plan is supported with a governance framework that discusses how the plan will remain living, how it will be changed and revised, who's responsible for the various components of the plan. There's a prioritization framework that demonstrates how proposed new actions will be evaluated to ensure that they have the same level of rigor as the actions currently in the plan, and an investment scenario, which will help us identify, it lays out one possible pathway for investing in community-wide carbon neutrality. And of course, all of our work focus not just on carbon neutrality, but a slew of other co-benefits that emerge when identified actions are implemented. So this slide just identifies a few of those co-benefits. So the plan. The plan is composed of 7 overarching strategies, which serve as the foundation of the plan. The strategies are fairly immovable, and I'm sure none of them will surprise you. The 7 strategies are powering our electrical grid with 100% renewable energy, switching all of our fuel sources to electric, and then significantly improving the energy efficiency of everything in our community, reducing the miles that we travel by half, the miles traveled by vehicle in half, significantly changing the way that we use, reuse, and dispose of materials, so fostering more of a cyclical economy, enhancing the resilience of our people and our place. And then the 7th strategy is an other strategy, but it's not because these things don't belong in any one of the other strategies. It's because these belong in everything. Things like equity, economic rigor, they have to be taken into account at every step of the process. So under each of those 7 strategies are 44 specific actions. Again, these are outlined in the document online. You can find, you know, we of course don't have time today to talk through all of these actions, but just to give you a sense, they run the gamut from distributed generation to bulk electric buy programs to water quality sensors, to launching a net zero energy affordable housing program. There's a lot. Looking forward, the staff in the office have identified the following as some of the immediate priorities and action items. So we'll continue to use the governance framework to guide our work, and we are confident that some things will be wildly successful, others will not. So we are working to create a culture that allows for smart experimentation within the city. You will find the term failure positive throughout the document, and that's what we mean by that. We can't, a lot of what we're doing and what we're proposing to be done hasn't really been done before. We're rooting it in the best science and knowledge that we have available to us, but because there isn't much precedent, there is the chance for failure, and we just want to embrace that failure as a stepping stone to getting closer to the goal. So the last thing that I want to leave you with is a little calculation of the cost of the action. So what staff did here is calculate the social cost of carbon associated with the greenhouse gas emissions in our community just from the period of 2000 to 2018. So using an average cost of $55 a ton, staff found that the city of Ann Arbor, just over an 18-year period, is responsible for over $2.3 billion social costs due to the emissions we've released. Society is bearing this cost, and so just assuming that climate action is just a cost misses the point that inaction will come with a much greater cost. As such, we are looking for ways to talk about our activities not as a cost, but as a real investment in our people, in our place, and in our shared future. So that's most of it for A2Zero. I'll put in the chat the links to some things, and at this point, we can open it up to some questions.
Great.
What have you got?
Thank you so much, Zach. That was a wonderful short overview of what's been going on. And what I wanted to start off with a couple questions that are sort of related to CCL and the kind of work that we do and our view of the A2Zero plan. And then we'll just kind of open it up to any other questions for a few more minutes. So first of all, as you know, I think CCL is working to enact federal carbon pricing legislation as a national organization. And we believe that if fossil fuels begin to include their actual costs, that would facilitate most of the local carbon neutrality initiatives. It would make all of them more straightforward because, there would be this incentive to switch away from fossil fuels. So, but there also seems to be a view that federal legislation is completely unrelated to local initiatives to reduce, to be carbon neutral. So how do you think we could help people make that connection between, advocating for federal policy that would facilitate this plan and the local plan?
Well, my question, I'll respond with a question, and that is, how much work does CCL do at the state level in any given state?
Primarily, we're focused on the federal level just because we're advocating for particular federal policy, although in some states we do advocate for help foster state carbon pricing initiatives. But that does kind of tie in with my second question to you, which is, what kinds of policies need to change at the state and local level for A2Zero, because that is the kind of work that we are also, that type of advocacy is what we're used to doing.
Certainly. So that's a great question. My pre-COVID, Governor Whitmer was preparing to announce some major new state commitments towards climate action. It, with COVID, was put on hold, rightly so, because there's a larger emergency that's a little more imminent at the moment. And but some of those, there are bills being presented before the House again. And so we're starting to re-examine some of that. And there are 4 bills that are going before the House that could use support. And so while I am not a policy expert, I won't be able to recite to you off the top of my head all of the legislation, but I can definitely point you in the direction of where those bills are. I can also put that in the chat. Specifically speaking, aside from those 4 bills that are being presented, there are some things that will allow A2Zero to really flourish if we are able to make those changes at the state level. One example is the building code. There is a pretty low standard for what the minimum energy efficiency requirements are in the state of Michigan. There is some interesting language in the state code that has so far been interpreted as that minimum being a ceiling. So even though local jurisdictions can pass codes and regulations that are different from the state, here's one example where we cannot. So Ann Arbor alone cannot enforce a stricter energy efficiency code than what the state has. This is very prohibitive in our ability to enforce some of those codes. In Ann Arbor, nearly 2/3 of our total emissions come from our buildings. So there is a great opportunity to reduce our emissions through better efficiency standards. You'll find, if you all work at the federal level, that that's a little bit higher than the national average for emissions from buildings. But we've got a pretty robust transportation system. A lot of people who live in Ann Arbor also bike or walk. So there are alternative transportations being used. And so that's why the buildings occupy a larger portion of our emissions. But it's really important that we work on that. So there's one hurdle. Another is it would relate to the first strategy of 100% renewable energy production. Perhaps some of you know there is a 1% cap on energy production from solar. It was honestly, I think it was arbitrarily chosen as 1% of the new generation each year can come from solar. And that is also very prohibitive. We're hitting that max. In Ann Arbor, we have had a fairly successful solarized program. It started as a federal program under Obama, but has kind of been left up to individual communities to take up on their own. And I'm very proud to say that here in Ann Arbor, we have a pretty robust system. And in fact, there are communities across the country that are looking at us and how we are so successful at it. So we are looking, the ballpark right now is 78 new megawatts of solar this year on residential rooftops. And that means that we're hitting that 1% and we're getting really close to it all the time. And it's kind of silly that we can't go beyond. But that's another point of legislation where we could use help. Those are the two that come to mind off the top of my head. Okay. And I'll send you the information about those 4 other bills.
That would be great. Have you already started developing strategies for how you are going to advocate for changes in those policies?
Yes. Am I knowledgeable enough on those strategies to tell you about it? That's the question. Okay. Certainly. We have a someone who works for the city on our behalf in Lansing and who is lobbying for legislation change. We do have an ongoing conversation with DTE. We are actually even talking and partnering with cities, other cities and municipalities across the state. We've got a good relationship with Detroit. Unfortunately, their sustainability program is 90% furloughed right now. But there is a lot of interest there. In Jackson, in Warren, in Grand Rapids, there are a lot of municipalities who are looking also to make similar changes that we are. And so there is some momentum building in that. We're working on getting more organized so that we can all go to Lansing together. But there is more strategy than I'm able to touch on right now. So forgive me, please.
That would be great.
If there is interest, I can follow up with what those strategies look like.
Yeah, please do. Let us know. Here's one question in the chat, and for anybody else who has questions, feel free to either put your questions in the chat or just jump in. But here's one question that's already in the chat. What will be the impact of the current COVID economic shutdown on financing Ann Arbor's carbon neutrality plan?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's very important. I think one of the things that COVID has highlighted very much in Washtenaw County, also across the country, are a lot of these equity disparities that currently exist, and it has exposed those who are most vulnerable to things like climate change. It has shown a light on who will be most affected. So that's a great question. Do I know the best way to handle that financially? I don't. Does it mean that we need to halt climate change? Absolutely not. Climate change efforts, we do still need to continue working on it as hard as we can. And if that means, we are going to have to get creative, and we're doing what we can to keep costs low right now until we can figure out how the economy and how our governments and our residents are going to come back from so much of what COVID has caused. But it, at the same time, has highlighted how utterly important it is that we tackle this quickly.
Okay. What is the plan for converting all the existing residential heating systems from natural gas-based to clean energy-based?
Great question. We've explored a couple of options. Right now, what's looking to be the most promising is partnering with manufacturers of like heat pumps. So we're talking Mitsubishi or Trane that use either air source or water source heat pump, ground source heat pumps, and contractors and residents. We're working on building a program that will help get these into homes. It will help fund getting these into homes. We would like to make finances available because, as per that last question, everybody's feeling COVID, and it would be naive for us to think that we can just pay to get these in. So we're looking for alternative sources of money. Unfortunately, there are a lot of grant programs available that are also trying to achieve these goals, and we're lucky that we have those resources available to us. So things like, we also were looking at doing, getting code into either the state or the local jurisdictions that would put restrictions on new gas installations. Unfortunately, that's a really difficult one to juggle legally. There is a powerhouse, so to speak, which is this investor-owned utility that, of course, makes money off of putting gas into homes. And so I think at this point we've decided that's not technically feasible at this point, or legally. So,
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Does anybody have a question that they just want to unmute themselves and ask?
I have a quick question. I'm wondering if the results of the city council race will have any impact on the work you guys are able to do.
That's a really great question. Because council unanimously adopted the A2Zero plan, I don't anticipate any major changes. At this point, I believe we're down to 2 remaining candidates, one of whom is Tom Crawford, who is currently the interim. And Missy and Tom have a good working relationship. He understands the importance of the A2Zero plan and is able to work with our office well. Kara, I forget her last name, is the other candidate who I think we also believe understands the importance of it. She did in her responses that I noticed mentioned that this is something that will need to be highlighted. It needs to be prioritized in city action. So certainly there will be some effect. I don't know what that effect will be. I don't believe that it will be detrimental to our efforts.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Zach, for taking the time to talk with us. And I hope that you will be sure to keep us posted on ways that we can be involved, particularly in the advocacy arena, since that's kind of the arena that we are used to working in. So thanks again for your time and appreciate your work.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'll put my contact information and a link to those House bills in the chat here in just a moment.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.